Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Work at Home Rockstar Podcast. Today's guest, we have the CEO of SSSE, and what he does is he specializes in using creative deal structuring to purchase cash flowing assets and to build ground up institutional grade self-storage facilities. I'm super excited to be rocking out today with Fernando Angelucci. Hey, Fernando, you ready to rock?
I am, Tim.
Awesome. We always start off on a good note. Tell me a story of success we can be inspired by.
Yeah, so I think the biggest success I had was leaving the corporate life and deciding to chase my dream. I read a book by Tim Ferriss called The 4 Hour Workweek,
Mm.
and it had a very interesting exercise in it, which was called a fear setting exercise. I was so afraid to leave my engineering job. I didn't know what would happen. What if I would fail? And basically, what the book said is put basically two lines on a piece of paper, number them from 0 to 10. The top line is, what is the worst thing that could possibly happen? 0 is nothing changes. 10 is you die. 9 is you go to prison for life. So there's your range. Now score it. Then go to the second line, also 0 to 10. This is, what is the best possible thing that can happen? 0 is nothing changes. 10 is you're living your absolute dream life. And so I ended up doing the mental gymnastics, and really the worst thing that could happen was I put it as a 3. I still had my degree. If it didn't work out, I could always go back into the job market. If I was tough on cash for a little bit, I'm sure I could, stay with friends or family, etc. But on the positive line, it was a 9. I should have put a
Ooh.
10, knowing what I know now, but it was a 9. I said, hey, 3 to 9, that makes the most sense. So I ended up quitting. Basically jumped out of the plane and built the parachute on the way down. I cash advanced almost $100,000 off of 12 different credit cards to start the
Wow.
business, and then never looked back. Today, I run a self-storage private equity company. We've done over 55 transactions across 26 states, over $240 million. I
Wow.
travel 9 to 10 months out of the year, working from virtual offices, if you will. And I'm living my dream life.
Wow. So you didn't burn the candle at both ends and keep the job and work at the same time. You just went all in.
Yeah, so I started just a little bit, so maybe a couple months doing that, and I realized how much output that I was being able to achieve just in the nights and weekends, and I realized that the longer I keep this up, either I'm going to get burned out from the business that I wanted to create or the job, or both. And that
Mm,
was not a healthy strategy. So
yeah.
instead of trying to keep my foot in both sides, I figured the best thing to do was just focus 100% of my attention on the one thing that I wanted to do that I think would move my life forward. And that's what I did. So I did some real estate on the side for a couple months and then decided to quit. And the way I quit was a way that made sure that I'd have no way to come back to that same company,
Oh
because you
no.
gotta, you gotta set the ability to hold yourself accountable. And if
Yeah.
you always know that there's a way to go back, you're not going to really try as if it's the last possible thing that you can do. So I had to make sure that there was no other option but success.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, I mean, that's a really cool exercise that you got into. I'm wondering, how did you find the book?
I've, since I was a teenager, I never thought I liked to read, but then picked up a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad
Mm,
by
yeah.
Robert Kiyosaki. And then that's when I discovered the kind of, I hate this word, but kind of self-help books that are not fiction, or, things that you can actually apply in your life to make your life better. Maybe sales psychology, personal psychology, mindset, etc. So I just started going down that rabbit hole of, buying one book, reading it, finding it fantastic. And a lot of these books, they usually reference other books. The authors will
Yes.
reference other books in their books. So
Yeah.
then I start buying those. And then all of a sudden, in a couple of years, I have multiple bookshelves filled. And Tim Ferriss's was one of the ones that I had gotten early on. I think I was 19 when I read his first book.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, I was in probably my early 20s, so just a little older than you when I started getting into the self-help stuff. And I just remember like people like thinking I was so weird because I was always reading these like business books instead of the fiction that they're reading, right? And they're like,
Right.
when you say you like to read, they're like, yeah, but that doesn't count. I'm like, it
Yeah,
counts, I think. You know,
I agree.
that's awesome. Now, okay, so along with the good notes, sometimes there's some things that don't go as planned when you're setting up your business, when you're getting moving. And I don't like to call them failures because I mean they're all learning experiences, but
Right.
they are what keep people out of the game a lot of
Sure.
times, right? They're just scared
Sure.
about that stuff happening. So I like to bring a couple of them up or one of them up that might be a bad one that might scare somebody, but you're still here, right? So can
Sure.
you share a story with me?
Yeah. I think the one of the biggest challenges people have when they go into, business, working from home, being a business owner, is thinking that they should do everything themselves
Mm,
because they want to keep the max amount of profit that they can. And the problem with that is as you start scaling, you start burning out. And now that thing that usually made you excited to wake up in the morning, the thing that got you out of bed becomes something that you don't look forward to doing anymore. And that's usually because you're overworked and you're not using systems and processes and procedures in your business to either, automate, eliminate, or delegate tasks to people that have lower per hour value on their time. So one of the first times I burnt out, I was in the single family home space and buying, fixing, and flipping, wholesaling single family assets, not basically not building up the team like I should have. And I was working too many hours. I went from working a 60-hour per week corporate job to working 80, 85-hour per week. Basically, I built a job for myself. I couldn't call it a business because I wasn't an owner. I was basically just the main employee or one of the main employees.
mhm.
And then I got burnt out, and it really made me want to quit and go back into the corporate world. But luckily, did a reassessment, got some third party advisors into the business, showing us what we're doing right, what we were doing wrong, where we can put systems and processes, procedures in place. And from that point on, we started to scale pretty heavily until we decided to finally get into the commercial real estate space or self storage specifically.
Hmm. When you say we, who was we at the time?
Yeah. So when I started the business, it was just me. And every time I would get a quick win, a small check here or there, 6,500, 10,000, I would take a picture of it and I would send it to my best friend that was my randomly assigned roommate in college, freshman year,
Wow.
Steven. So eventually, Steven was being a good guy about it. He didn't like his job. He wasn't making a lot of money. And he eventually said, listen, you either got to stop sending me pictures of these checks or you got to show me how to do this business. And I said, I thought you'd never ask. So finally brought him in. And since then we've been 50-50 partners all the way.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. And
Mhm.
so if you were to do it again, like would you do it any different or did you need to
Oh
get to
yeah.
that burnout mark before you could hire?
No, I would have done it. Knowing what I know now, a decade or more later, I would have started larger. So a lot of people think that you have to start small and then bank,
Yep.
a little bit of cash here and there to eventually get to the point where you can go to the next level and then do the kind of same thing. That takes a ton of time. And when you look at, our lives, people don't realize kind of how finite it is. One of the things that I
Mhm.
like to do is break down what your life expectancy is into weeks and then see what you're doing on a weekly basis. And you really don't have a lot of time. So why put the same amount of effort in going after, let's say, $100,000 payout when you can put the same amount of effort into going for a 10 million or a $20 million payout? So what I realized in the beginning is that I should have just started adding zeros onto what my goals were and what type of deals I wanted to do, and then realize that I don't, again, going back to the previous point, I didn't need to do everything, and that includes my money. I didn't have to use only my money. I could have from the beginning started raising capital from external, third parties to help build the dream and then give them a great return along the way. And that's how we've been able to scale so quickly over the last, 7 to 8 years, is by focusing on the point that doesn't need to be my cash equity. It doesn't need to be my debt. Someone else can sign on the debt for me as long as they're properly compensated. As long as I have the operational warehouse, the opportunities, the deal flow, I could put that all together much faster. So I just wish for, in the beginning, I was flipping $40,000 houses on the south side of Des Moines, Iowa, when I could have already just been building $10 million, $20 million assets from the get-go.
Wow. Well, was there some people that came into your life that help you teach this or to teach you this stuff, or?
Yeah. So this is one of the things that I always tell kind of new real estate investors is, surround yourself with people that are successful in your field.
Yeah.
There's a great saying, I forgot who said it, but you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're spending time with a bunch of people that are making minimum wage, you're probably going to be making minimum wage. But if you have the ability to surround yourself with people that are, at the next level or next 2 or 3 levels of where you want to get to, that will start rubbing off on you. So easy ways to find this. There's always local meetup groups. There's also, paid membership groups. So if you want to get really serious about your craft or your trade, you got to go to the places where, most of the masses aren't allowed to go because there's some type of paywall. And in most cases, that paywall makes sense because then, the guys that are doing 100 million a year, they're not going to go to the community center free meetup on a Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday night, right?
Yeah.
They're going to go to the $50,000 a year paid, once quarterly, once a week-long trip. So these masterminds are super important. I have always been parts of masterminds going through the business life cycle. I learned this from Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, where he talks about masterminds and how important they are. So I've always had a general business mastermind. It didn't have to necessarily be about my asset class or industry. And then I would also be a part of a mastermind that was specific to what I was trying to do at that time. And, you don't have to start at the $50,000 level. What I always tell people is set aside a number of top line revenue for educational purposes. So, start with 1% or 5%. I think 5% is pretty aggressive, but if you want to scale faster, that's how you do it. And then that money goes into a special education account. And in the beginning, it may only be a couple $100, but a couple $100 can buy you some really awesome books, right? Then all of a sudden you maybe get $1,000 or $2,000. And that's a great 3-day weekend course that you can pay for. And then very quickly that starts growing. And then all of a sudden you have 10,000 in that account or 20,000. Now you can start paying to get into those higher level rooms, those higher level groups where it's crazy how fast you can compress learning. Something that took somebody 20, 30 years to learn how to do, just by being next to them and going to these masterminds, you can compress all of that knowledge, all the successes and failures that they've had into a period of 1 year for you. So now you're getting to catapult and almost, skip over all of that pain and heartache and discovery that someone else had to go through. So I always tell people, you can learn from other people's successes, but you can also learn from other people's failures. But to learn from people's failures, you have to be in a room where people are willing to be vulnerable and share those true failures.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then that's the next question. Like, what do you think is in it for them to be vulnerable and share those failures and help you?
They're in the room for the same reason. They're trying to grow and level up. There's that old adage that, 2 heads are better than one.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes all it takes is a fresh perspective for somebody to see something that you have been stuck on for 1, 2, 3 years. And sometimes it comes from somebody in a different industry than yours, because in their industry, they do things a little bit differently. They look at problems differently than the way that you look at problems in your industry. That's why I always say it's important to not only be in a mastermind that is industry specific, but one that's just general business, because then you can learn how other industries are tackling problems. So they're there to learn as well. It's not like these are people that aren't getting anything out of the groups. The people that go to these groups, typically the structure is you go, it's multiple days, they're broken into rooms, and then each person has to present anywhere between 30 to 50-minute presentation on a give that they're giving to the group, something that they learned, something that they think is valuable to the group. And then at the end of that presentation, they have maybe 10 minutes for an ask. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what I've been struggling on. Q&A, let's figure it out together in this room. So it's kind of like a sounding board, almost like a board of directors that you don't have to pay for their insurance and healthcare, et cetera. So it's super awesome structure.
Yeah, and sometimes you can learn from somebody who's even at the beginning of their journey because maybe you might have gotten away from some of the fundamentals,
Sure.
right? And you're like, oh, geez, I used to do that and I got success and now I'm stuck. And maybe that might be the kind of the aha that you get from someone who's just getting started, right?
100%. 100%.
So now you do a lot of traveling.
I do.
How do you set up your jam space, your home office if you keep on moving?
Yeah. So the key is to have an office that is easy to set up and take down on a moment's notice, but then also to have kind of processes and procedures in place to make sure that you're always in a reliable space, a reliable mindset. So, for example, anywhere I'm traveling, I do a lot of podcasts. I always find podcast studios to rent. So this is not in my office. This isn't a virtual screen. This is a real podcast studio that I rent on on an hourly basis. The other thing is to kind of, for me, because I try to travel as light as possible, I travel around with just one backpack. It's a travel backpack. I think it's 45 liters. So my workspace has to be super refined. So laptop, phone, a satellite Wi-Fi, just in case I'm in an area where there isn't reliable internet, or like we were talking before we started recording, there was a period of time where I worked from a Airbnb that I rented in the middle of the tropical rainforest. So there was no internet connection there at all. And then, making sure that you have a proper work hygiene. So just because you're working from home, I mean, and this is just my opinion, so I'm sure there's a lot of people that would disagree with this, but just because you're working from home doesn't mean that you should be working in your pajamas, rolling out of bed. I at least like to treat it like I'm going to work. I get up, I take a shower, I brush my teeth, I eat breakfast, I put on work clothes, and then I go into my work space, wherever I set up that space to be. Typically, it's not in the space that I'm relaxing in, because that mental separation is not only good for when you're trying to get things done on the work side, but then also when you're on the balance side, the work-life balance side, when you're done working, when are you actually done working? And for me, it's I put away all my stuff, I take off my work clothes, I put on my chill clothes, and I'm done for the day. Because like I said, you want for people that have been business owners for long enough, burnout is a real problem. And if you lose your passion for what you're doing, all of a sudden you're in a nightmare of your own making. So you got to make sure to set boundaries, just like you would set with someone else paying you. You're not going to answer phone calls and emails on the weekend when you're with your family. Why would you do it in your own business, right?
Yeah.
So just making sure that you have that proper hygiene is super important.
Well, that's really good. I remember actually when I was first starting to do cold calls, I actually did put on a suit and tie to make phone calls, and it actually did help. I was more confident on the phone. It just was. It is what it is, right?
Look good, feel good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Now, I imagine that it might be a little bit weird for the people around you. Like, what are you doing sitting in your office with your suit on? But I mean, hey, if it works, it works, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a ton of books on the psychology of this exact aspect of working from home and how do you separate work-life balance that I've read. And I think it's super important. It may seem weird, may seem cheesy, but it really does have awesome results, both from stress levels and from, being laser focused when you are in work mode, and then being super relaxed when you go out of work mode into, chill mode, or I'm at home, because you're in the same space. Usually you're in your home. You just move from, I don't know, your kitchen or your office to your living room. Or in some cases, like when I first started, I was in a studio apartment. So there was no different zones, if you will. I had to like make my own zone. So that's why I forced myself to, put away all my things, put them out of sight. Cause just even seeing my laptop would start making me think about work again when it was 9-10 p.m. to start disrupting my sleep. That's not healthy. So making sure that you have proper work hygiene, I think, is one of the most important things for your kind of jam space, if you know.
Now, I don't remember, I don't know what's going on in school systems today, but I know when I was going to school, I don't remember a real big curriculum on cash flow and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I'm wondering, like, how do you learn that? How do you keep that going? How do you make sure that you're making more than you're putting out? Like, do you keep an eye on those numbers every day? Do you have somebody?
Yeah. So, there's obviously levels to this. So in the beginning, it was just me. Now I have a full, bookkeeping team and accountants that handle that stuff for me. But from the beginning, for your listeners that are thinking about taking the plunge, you always got to focus on your profit first. I know this sounds kind of backwards. Most people think, hey, here's the revenue, pay all your expenses, and then whatever's left over is what I'm going to take home. But what you end up realizing is expenses start growing as the businesses start growing. So if you
Yeah.
don't take profit off the table, you have problems. So there's a really good book. I'm blanking on the author, but the name of the book is called Profit First. I really recommend people take a look. I not only use that system in that book for the business and the multiple businesses that we have, but then also for my personal life, I created a profit first flow
Okay.
that makes sure that I'm taking chips off the table all the time. Because in these masterminds, I've met guys that that they had successful businesses for a decade, 2 decades, and all of a sudden they file for bankruptcy. How can that be, right? How can you be successful for multiple decades and then have nothing to show for it at the end?
Mm.
And it's usually because they were never taking chips off the table. They just kept reinvesting into the business. And then all of a sudden, once the business was no longer viable because either the economy changed or we had a global pandemic or whatever happened, they had nothing to show for 20 years of work. So I think that's a huge mistake that a lot of people make right off the bat. So definitely read Profit First. I think it's Mike Michalowicz, I think is the name of the author. Super cool guy. I saw him speak in person. Really animated dude. So go out and check out that book. And then the second thing that I'd tell people to focus on is when you got to have clear goals. So when you go into business being extremely vague, you don't really go anywhere. It's like getting into a car without a GPS or a map and then just driving, hoping that you're going to get to your destination. That doesn't work. So the other book that I tell people to read is Traction by Gino Wickman. Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business by Gino Wickman.
Mhm.
And it basically shows you how to set up a operating system for your business with very clear and concise goals on a 10-year, 5 or 3 year, 1 year, 90-day, 1 week, and daily level. So you know exactly where you are and you have a scorecard they can easily look at to see, am I on track or am I not on track and why? So
Yeah.
those are 2 books I really recommend for as far as cash flow management goes.
I love that. What other tools do you use? You probably have a pretty good tech stack, right? Being with doing all your traveling. What do you use?
Yeah. Yeah, now it's been getting a lot easier, but when we first started this business over a decade ago, you had to be very nimble and you had to be able to kind of MacGyver things together.
Mhm.
Now there's a lot of full tech stacks that are kind of all encompassing. But then what I found out is, the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, is still a really great adage to keep in mind because you can get, over your skis and all of a sudden decide that this Salesforce massive package that costs $10,000 a month that's going to solve all your problems will solve all your problems, and then it doesn't. So
Yeah.
what I found is that I live on Excel. I love Excel. No reason to migrate from that. Email client is great. I do have a CRM that I use. It's called Asana, but there's many similar. They're like ClickUp and Monday, and there's a ton of them. Just kind of helps keep projects oriented, tasks. And the great part about it is those tasks also have deadlines that they start pinging you via email or even text message if you allow it to. So you can kind of stay on track. So, as far as total tech stack goes, we have Asana is where we live kind of most of the time because that's what keeps the rest of the team and the rest of the company oriented towards their specific goals for their specific departments, et cetera. But then also it flows up to the company-wide goals and what we as the owners are setting for everybody. And then, like I said, just kind of super basic stuff, keeping it simple. Excel, we use Gmail. We use the corporate version of Gmail, but it's still a Gmail account.
Yeah.
Pretty basic. And then, with all the AI stuff that's coming out nowadays, we do dabble a little bit into, some of these LLMs that help reduce the amount of time it takes to produce certain deliverables like presentations and summaries of financial data, things like that.
Yeah, I love that. And that's the thing. I mean, sometimes these all-encompassing sort of tech stacks might be kind of mediocre at everything rather than picking
Yeah.
something that's like really good at what it does type thing, right?
Yeah, and then not only that, but then it's also a single point of failure. So we saw recently when
yeah.
there was like a massive outage. I think it was the Cloudflare, something like that outage. Took down something insane like 23% of the internet.
Yeah.
So if you had everything in your business housed on one of these CRMs that was the do everything for you CRM, and now you have no access to that CRM for gosh knows how long, that could be a huge problem in your business, especially if your business deals in kind of very tight deadlines and large money transactions, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see a lot of businesses running their whole marketing on Facebook or whatever it happens to be their social media platform too, which is super dangerous, right? I mean, something could happen. You could lose your profile, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Single point of failure. You always want at least 2 to 3 vendors for every thing that you need, every vendor that you're looking to use. So
yeah, I love that. Let's get into your guest solo. So tell me what's exciting in your business right now.
yeah. So up until recently, how we've raised money for every one of our deals were what are called single asset syndications, which means that when I need money for a deal, I go out and tell people I need money for this one deal. And the hard part about that is before I can raise the money, I have to get everything else lined up, the financing, the deal, everything, which meant that I usually only had a couple weeks, 3 to 8 weeks to raise all the money I needed for some of these projects that were pretty large, $15, $16 million build that I had to raise $3 to $5 million on.
Wow.
The cool thing that I'm super excited about now is we have launched our first fund, and it's actually a general partner fund, which offers kind of higher returns than what a limited partner fund would offer. So now we have kind of like this, this track record from the single asset syndications. All these investors are coming into the GP fund, which now means that we have cash to play with before we actually need the cash, which allows us to do some very creative things. So for example, when we're negotiating a purchase on a property, we can say, hey, here's the regular price. Here's a severely discounted price, but we'll pay you in 10 days. We'll give you your entire purchase price, and it could be a couple $1 million, right, in 10 days. And usually there are some people that are willing to accept that because time is money to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So super excited about the GP fund. It is our first fund. It's a $25 million fund, and it invests alongside me and Steven as the owner on a lot of these single asset syndications that we do. So super excited about that. I know it may sound a little bit like gobbledygook to some of the people that are out there, but in the syndication space, it's a huge milestone.
Cool. Now, what is the type of person that would benefit from that?
Yeah, so we help a lot of high income business owners and W-2 investors. So a lot of what we do is focused around tax advantageous structuring of deals. So for example, we closed on a deal in Rochester, New York, literally on New Year's Eve. And every investor that invested into that project, for every dollar they invested in, they got to write off 90 cents on their tax returns for any passive investments on their K1. So that was huge, and it helped a lot of our investors out that were trying to, plan taxes. Maybe they didn't hold tax money in a reserve account as they were working throughout the year, which I know has happened to a lot of new business owners. It happened to me when I was a new business owner, because now no longer it's being taken out of your paycheck ahead of time. You're just getting all that money and then you forget to set things aside. So then they come scrambling to me and say, hey, Fernando, I have a $300,000 tax bill. I have $50,000 to pay this. What am I going to do? Can you help me out? I said, actually, I can. I have these deals that you can invest in that will lower your tax burden. So, typically high income W-2 earners, business owners, especially if you're a business owner that you have passive gains that you need to offset, we're very good at offsetting those.
Okay, interesting. All right. And I mean, that leads to something that we could have talked about earlier, which is the tax issue, right? In your business and
Yeah.
making sure that you save enough
Mhm.
money for the taxes, right?
Right.
Wow. So now, how would what's the process of someone finding out more information about this?
Yeah, so I always tell people there's kind of two ways to reach me. So if you're more of an active outreach guy, you're a cold caller, you're a sales guy, you're listening to this right now, and you're just like, Fernando, just give me your number. I want to call you right now.
Mm.
Here is my cell phone. My real cell phone number is 630-408-8090. So for all my extroverts out there, 630-408-8090. If you're somebody that's more of an introvert, let's say, or a little bit slower to reach out when you have questions or interests, I always tell those folks to go to our website. It's www.ssse.com, and there you can find out all about us, what we do, the 100+ podcasts I've been on, a fact page with video responses to every question. I think we got like hundreds of questions on there. And then if you want to schedule a call on your own time and terms, there's a link that you can go right to my calendar and you can schedule a time that works for you.
Okay, awesome. All right. So before we go, let's talk a little bit about music. Who's your favorite rock
Yeah.
star?
It's a tough, this is
Yeah.
the tough question. Um, I mean, I know we were talking about this before. I don't know if I can pick one of the guys in the band, but my favorite band of all time is Humphreys McGee. It's a jam band. They are pretty rock heavy for a jam band. So I'd
Mhm.
say if you're allow me to answer
A
with the
band's
whole band.
fine. Yep.
Okay. Humphreys McGee.
Awesome. Right on. And so you like, what do you, have you seen them in concert? Or like, do you follow them?
Yeah, I've probably seen them more than 40 times live. I go to
Wow.
the music festivals that they headline. I camp out in a tent. Nowadays, I'm getting a little bit older, so it's more of I rent an RV and then rent an RV space to camp out instead of just being on the ground like I used to. But yeah, I follow them around all the time. I love the music festival culture and the food and exploring new music that you hear just from walking from one stage to another stage. So really love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever played an instrument?
I have. So piano, guitar, I sing. Nowadays it's more of a hobby than something I spend a lot of time on. But high school, college days, I was playing guitar a couple hours every day, piano when I was at home. My parents have a piano in their house. And now, like we were talking before we started recording, because I travel a lot, I go to countries sometimes where I don't speak the native language. I found that one of the easiest ways to connect to people that don't speak your language is to go up onto the stage and sing some karaoke.
Yeah.
And you end up making a lot of friends for life real fast.
Yeah. Yeah. That is an awesome, awesome tip for sure. Ray on.
Mm.
Well, thank you so much for rocking out with me today, Fernando. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on, Tim.
No problem. And to the listeners, make sure you go to workathomerockstar.com for more information. We'll see you next time on the Work at Home Rockstar podcast.